Forget jump scares. Forget cheap thrills. We're talking about horror comics that are genuinely hard to get through. The kind of stories with images and ideas so disturbing, they stick with you long after you've put the book down. These comics don't just want to scare you. They want to get under your skin, burrow into your psyche, and leave a permanent mark. Today, we're cracking open 5 Western horror comics that go far beyond simple ghost stories. We're exploring tales that are so psychologically disturbing, so graphically intense, and so emotionally draining that you might struggle to even turn the page. These aren't your mainstream horror titles. This is the deep end of the pool, where the art is confrontational, the themes are taboo, and the experience is often more harrowing than it is entertaining. These are the comics that horror fans whisper about, the ones that should come with a heavy warning label. They tackle everything from systemic violence and religious blasphemy to the most grotesque forms of body horror and the absolute, nihilistic depths of human depravity. So you might want to steel your nerves as we count down 5 horror comics that are actually, genuinely, hard to read. Section 1. Comic number 5. The Boys. Coming in at number 5 is a title you probably recognize, thanks to its massively popular Amazon Prime show. The Boys, created by writer Garth Ennis and artist Derek Robertson. Now, if you've only seen the show, you might be thinking, sure, it's dark and violent, but is it that hard to read? And the answer is a hard yes. The comic book makes the TV series look like a Saturday morning cartoon by comparison. The series, which ran its main 72-issue course from 2006 to 2012, presents a world where superheroes, or supes, are real. They're celebrities marketed by the powerful Vaude-American corporation, and they are, almost without exception, monstrously corrupt, narcissistic, and depraved. The story follows a CIA-backed Black Ops team known as The Boys, led by the relentlessly brutal Billy Butcher. Their job? To keep the supes in line, often by the most violent means imaginable. What makes The Boys so difficult to stomach isn't just the violence, though there is plenty of it. Robertson's art is unflinching, depicting all manner of visceral carnage with gritty detail. But the real horror is in its absolute, bottomless cynicism. This is a world with no real heroes. The supes are monsters hiding behind capes, and the boys themselves are often just as vicious and morally compromised. Billy Butcher, in particular, is a far less sympathetic figure in the comics. He's a man so consumed by hatred that he becomes a villain in his own right. The comic pushes the boundaries of taste far beyond what the show dares. It's significantly more graphic with its depictions of sexual violence, which is often used to show the absolute power and impunity of the supes. Events that are handled with some restraint or altered for the show, like the sexual assault of Annie January, are portrayed with a cold, stomach-churning directness in the comic that is incredibly difficult to process. Characters who get redemptive or more sympathetic arcs in the show are often irredeemable in the source material. Lamplighter, for instance, is killed and later reanimated as a mindless, zombie-like husk a far cry from his more tragic portrayal on screen. The comic is a relentless barrage of nihilism. It is a story that tries so hard to gross you out on every page that it can leave you feeling exhausted and emotionally numb. It's a powerful satire, but its sheer nastiness makes it a truly challenging read. Section 2. Comic number 4. Preacher. Sticking with the master of transgression. Garth Ennis, our number 4 pick, is another one of his landmark series, created with the legendary artist Steve Dillon. Preacher. Running from 1995 to 2000 under DC's Vertigo imprint, Preacher is a sprawling, profane, and deeply blasphemous road trip across America. And just like The Boys, if you think the TV show was wild, the comic is in another league of extreme. The story follows Jesse Custer, a small-town Texas preacher who has lost his faith. His life is violently upended when he is possessed by a supernatural entity called Genesis, the hybrid offspring of an angel and a demon. This event not only gives him the word of God, the ability to command anyone to do as he says, but it also incinerates his entire congregation. Learning that God has abandoned heaven, Jesse embarks on a literal quest to find him and hold him accountable. He's joined by his gun-toting ex-girlfriend, Tulip O'Hare, and an Irish vampire named Cassidy. On the surface, Preacher is a dark comedy filled with razor-sharp dialogue. But underneath that humor is a current of profound horror that makes it a difficult journey. Dylan's clean, grounded art style makes the sudden, explosive moments of violence all the more shocking when they erupt on the page. This series is infamous for its willingness to smash any and all taboos. The violence is relentless. We witness a man's face being slowly sliced off, then nailed back on upside down. Jesse's childhood is a horrific story of torment at the hands of his twisted grandmother and her sadistic enforcers, one of whom engages in acts of animal cruelty described in sickening detail. But the real challenge of Preacher for many is its fearless assault on religious sensibilities. The story features a secret organization descended from Christ, an unstoppable undead cowboy known as the Saint of Killers who murders angels, and a God depicted as a cowardly, narcissistic absentee father. For a lot of readers, the blasphemy is far more shocking than the gore. The series also digs into the moral failings of its main characters. Cassidy, the charismatic vampire, seems like a lovable rogue at first, but as the story unfolds, his centuries of selfishness, addiction, and horrific treatment of women are laid bare. Preacher is a masterpiece, but its combination of extreme violence, sexual depravity, and unapologetic blasphemy makes it a comic that many will find impossible to get through. Section 3. Comic number 3. Black Hole. Moving away from the in-your-face horror of Garth Ennis, our number 3 pick takes us into a much quieter, but arguably more unsettling space. This is Black Hole, written and drawn by the one and only Charles Burns. Serialized from 1995 to 2005, Black Hole is a masterpiece of slow-burn dread that will leave you feeling hollowed out and deeply uncomfortable. Set in the suburbs of Seattle in the mid-70s, the story follows a group of teenagers who contract a mysterious, sexually transmitted disease known only as the bug. This isn't your typical STD. It causes its victims to develop grotesque and surreal physical mutations. Some grow tails, others sprout extra limbs, some shed their skin like a snake. There's no rhyme or reason to the transformations, and they're irreversible. What makes Black Hole so hard to read is its atmosphere of suffocating dread and its devastating portrait of alienation. The mutations are a powerful metaphor for the anxieties of adolescence, sexual shame, and social ostracism. The infected teens become outcasts, shunned by everyone, with many fleeing to live in makeshift camps in the woods, forming a new society of freaks. The comic perfectly captures that feeling of being trapped in a body you can't control and the deep loneliness that comes with it. Charles Burns's artwork is essential to the book's horror. He uses a stark, high-contrast black and white style with clean, almost clinical lines that make the grotesque body horror all the more repulsive. The transformations don't feel cartoonish. They feel chillingly real. Burns's panels are often small and claustrophobic, forcing you to confront the disturbing imagery head-on. The characters' faces are often drawn with mask-like, emotionless eyes, adding to the profound sense of despair that permeates the story. There's no monster to fight and no real mystery to solve. The characters never even find out where the disease comes from. Instead, the whole thing feels like a dreamlike, almost hypnotic descent into anxiety and paranoia. It has a story about the horrors of the body and the quiet terror of being an outsider. Reading Black Hole feels like being submerged in a fever dream you can't wake up from. All right, we're at the halfway point, and believe me, it only gets darker from here. If you're rediscovering some new horror to add to your reading list, or maybe your avoid at all costs list, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We get into the darkest corners of pop culture every week, and you won't want to miss what we unearth next. Now, back to the countdown. Section 4. Comic number 2, From Hell. For our number 2 spot, we have a towering work of historical fiction and psychological horror. A book so dense and demanding that its difficulty comes not just from its graphic content, but from its sheer intellectual and emotional weight. This is From Hell, created by the legendary writer Alan Moore and artist Eddie Campbell. Serialized from 1989 to 1996, this graphic novel is a sprawling, meticulous, and utterly terrifying deconstruction of the Jack the Ripper murders. From Hell is not a whodunit. Moore, drawing heavily from Stephen Knight's conspiracy theory book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution, identifies the killer early on as Sir William Gall, the Queen's physician. The motive is a grand conspiracy to silence a group of prostitutes who know about Prince Albert Victor's illegitimate child. Moore uses this framework to perform a deep autopsy on an entire Erie. This isn't just about a serial killer. It's about the birth of the 20th century, the dark heart of the British Empire, brutal class oppression, and the deep-seated misogyny of Victorian society. What makes From Hell so tough to read is a 1-2 punch. First, the violence. The murders are depicted in excruciating, almost clinical detail. Moore's famously detailed scripts guide Campbell to render the acts of mutilation with horrifying realism. These scenes are not for the faint of heart. They are brutal, methodical, and stripped of any sensationalism, which somehow makes them even more disturbing. The book forces you to bear witness to the dehumanization of these women in a way that is profoundly uncomfortable. Second, and perhaps more challenging, is the book's immense psychological depth. Moore weaves together history, occultism, Masonic ritual, and psychogeography into a narrative that is intellectually staggering. We spend a lot of time inside the mind of William Gall, a man who sees his gruesome work not as murder, but as a grand magical act to reassert patriarchal order and shape the future. His monologues are dense, chilling, and utterly convincing in their madness. Reading them feels like staring into a very real abyss. Eddie Campbell's scratchy, ink-drenched art is the perfect vehicle for this nightmare. He makes Victorian London feel like a corrupt, decaying organism. From Hell is over 500 pages long, and reading it is an immersive, exhausting experience. It's a book that demands your full attention, but it will leave you feeling emotionally and intellectually drained. It is, without a doubt, a masterpiece, but its combination of graphic brutality and dense, terrifying philosophy makes it one of the hardest reads out there. Section 5. Comic number 1, Crossed. And now we arrive at number 1, the book that represents the absolute peak of extreme, transgressive horror in comics. A series so notorious for its unrelenting brutality that even seasoned gorehounds approach it with caution. This is Crossed, created in 2008 by the man who's already on this list twice, Garth Ennis, alongside artist Jack Burrows. The premise of Crossed is simple. A pandemic sweeps the globe, but it doesn't turn people into mindless zombies. The infected, identifiable by a cross-shaped rash on their faces, keep their intelligence and their memories. What they lose is all moral restraint. Every dark impulse, every sadistic fantasy, every cruel thought is now their only motivation. They don't just kill. They rape, torture, mutilate, and cannibalize with a horrifying creativity and glee. To say this comic is hard to read is a monumental understatement. Crossed is a deliberate exercise in pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable to show on a page. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is off limits. The series features scenes of the most extreme sexual violence, graphic torture, and the murder of children, all rendered in Jack Burrows' clean, unflinching art style that leaves nothing to the imagination. The horror comes from the fact that the Crossed aren't monsters. They are us, with the filters gone. They are human beings acting on their darkest desires, which makes their cruelty feel infinitely more terrifying than any supernatural creature. The story follows a small band of survivors, But there is no hope here. The world of Crossed is one of complete and utter nihilism. Many critics and readers find the series to be gratuitous and mean-spirited. It is often described as shock value for the sake of shock value, because there isn't really a deeper message or grand philosophical point. The point is the horror. The point is to show you the absolute worst humanity is capable of, and to not look away. It's a comic that dares you to turn the page, knowing that whatever you see next will be worse than what you just saw. For its sheer, unadulterated vision of human evil, Crossed stands alone at the top of our list as the hardest horror comic to read. So that's the list. 5 horror comics that truly test a reader's limits. From the cynical satire of The Boys and the religious horror of Preacher, to the psychological dread of Black Hole, the intellectual weight of From Hell, and the absolute nihilism of Crossed. These stories show the incredible power of comics to explore the darkest parts of the human condition. They use that unique combination of words and static images to create horror that isn't about a cheap jump scare, but about a lasting, lingering unease that stays with you. They challenge our ideas of good and evil, sanity and madness, and the very stability of our society and our own bodies. These are not comics for everyone. They are demanding and often unpleasant. But for those looking for horror that's willing to stare directly into the abyss, these 5 books are essential, if difficult, reads. But hey, that's just my list. The world of horror comics is vast and deep. What did I miss? What are the comics that you found genuinely hard to get through? Let me know in the comments. I'm always looking for the next story to keep me up at night. If you enjoyed this trip into the darkness, please give this video a like and share it with a fellow horror fan if you think they can handle it. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss our next exploration of the terrifying and the taboo. Thanks for watching, and try to have sweet dreams.